Hello, I'm Frank Stanisci of Candid Frank Live. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV Sticks, Roku Sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now, joining me as usual is Aaron William Freeland. And Aaron, I got to tell you, I watched that game last night, and all I could think of was a good buddy of ours named Jared Harris, who uses the term "they the bed."
Mm. Yeah, no, that was definitely one of those games where you got to kind of chalk it up to one of those. I think that the Leafs are trying to play mind games with the Tampa Bay Lightning, trying to show them that
That's
yes, in
some
fact,
people
we
are.
are that bad.
I think the Austin Matthews thing has everyone questioning what's actually happening because nobody really knows what's happening. The only clues out there are the ones given by the coach over the pregame and postgame interviews, or the post-practice interviews, I apologize, which basically say he has an injury that he's never had before, that he's never had to deal with before. It is not a bad injury. It's a day-to-day thing. It's a nagging thing. And if it was playoffs, he would be playing. So, you know, it's, hangnail.
I mean, it's entirely possible. In the words of Sheldon Keefe, it makes no sense to put him back in. So, I mean, if it comes to an injury like that and we're this close to the playoffs, I trust the coach's judgment. I mean, the Leafs have been, what, 6-2-1 now without Austin in the lineup? It's not like we've done poorly without him.
Yeah,
So,
I hear you. I feel you.
it's one of those
Um,
things, though, that kind of makes you wonder if he really, and I'm going to throw a little fuel on the fire here. It kind of makes you wonder if he's really the heart candidate that everybody thinks he's supposed to be.
I think you can go either way in that. There's two directions you can go there, maybe three. I won't go to either, other than to suggest that um, there really isn't much that can be proven by that. There are a lot of other factors, and I think the biggest one is opportunities come up for players who may not otherwise have one. So, for a short term, you know, defensively, the opposition has to change their game plan. And as far as the Leafs are concerned, the coach has a bit of an opportunity to give somebody a chance who doesn't normally have a chance, and it's only for a short time. So, it's not like teams are going to make book on the new lineup. So I don't really buy into that too much. I know you're saying it facetiously and/or with tongue in cheek. I get that. Once again, we get an egregious foul ignored by the referees under their clear view, and they make no call. A punch to the back of the head, a pretty vicious punch to the back of the head. It was one of those punches, Aaron, where you cock your elbow and you let her rip. It was a full throated punch to the back of the head to a player who's standing in front of the net. No call. And this happens too much with Toronto, and all those things that we've heard and those stats that TSN has used, we're seeing it in front of our eyes. And I think that game was played under duress for the Leafs. Now, I'm not saying they should be getting penalties. The Leafs are going to have to figure out how to deal with that, because that's exactly what's going to happen in the playoffs. That's exactly what's happened over the past few years in the playoffs.
Well, I mean, it was nice to see some pushback. It was nice to see them get
It
a little
came
more
late,
physically
though.
involved. It did, admittedly, come late. The game was well out of hand by the time
Long
any of
before
that
it,
actually happened. Oh
long
yeah,
before they.
but at the same time, you get to a certain point where you finally had enough, and no matter how well intentioned and well behaved you try to be, it gets to you. You know, I think one of the funniest moments of the night for me had to be when Kyle Clifford was in the scrum and tried to tap Corey Perry on the head with the butt end of his stick. It's now, admittedly, there were calls. There were quite a few calls that should have been made both ways,
Oh, absolutely.
but you just have to look at the referees honestly, at that point to get an idea. Because who was the head referee last night? A gentleman by the name of Skillner, who has been responsible for Sheldon Keefe getting into a whole passel of trouble with the NHL and being fined. So, I mean, one of the weirdest calls was when Corey Perry knocked over Alex Kerfoot behind the net. And when Alex Kerfoot fell, his stick hit Perry in the face because he fell. So Kerfoot got the high sticking and Corey Perry got the tripping. And it was one of the dumbest calls that I've seen in a long time.
I can't disagree with that. But what I will say is this, is that, how do we judge whether a team plays well or not? The bottom line is they win the game, right?
Yep.
How do we judge a referee? We judge a referee by how the game is played by the teams. If it's a well, by definition, we saw a poorly refereed game because it got to a certain point where, and it wasn't really, it wasn't really because, I don't know. I just think that he did a terrible job, and it was one of those ones where the game started getting out of hand. We knew it was going to get out of. I knew it was going to get out of hand right after that first shot to the back of the head. As soon as referees let stuff like that go, where's the bar?
Yeah, it gets thrown out,
There is no bar.
Watching that game, I felt that the referees were a little bit like Milhouse as a security guard. Well, it started to fall over, and then I watched it fall over.
That's exactly the problem with that game. It was probably one of the worst officiated games that I've seen, and it has nothing to do with the score. It has a lot to do with the score in the sense that, it was not a game that was played after the first period well by the Leafs, and it was played excellent by Tampa. Essentially because they went into that game saying, we're going to prove we're tougher than they are. This is how you beat this team. That's the reputation the Leafs have had over the past 4 years since Matthews and Marner have been, the centerpiece of this team. So, they're going to do that, go to the well, and the Leafs are going to have to, as I've told you for years, and I've told on this show for the last 5 years, the Leafs have to stand up early and stand up often until the message is sent that they're going to play hockey. And if you want to do otherwise, we have some guys that can do that too.
No, most assuredly. And it's a question of the league realizing that they do have those.
The league doesn't care. The league don't look for the league to care, because the league doesn't care if the Leafs lose, and because the Leafs are a team that are going to make money regardless of how things go. The league has to concern itself with all the other teams.
Let me rephrase. The other teams in the league, which is what I meant to say.
I'm funning with you.
I know,
kicking you in the butt. But there is some truth to that. If you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, you're hated by everybody, and the reason you're hated by everybody because you have, you basically have the richest franchise based on the devotion and the amount of fans that you have. It spawns a wee bit of jealousy, and it also creates a situation that makes you expendable when it comes to winning games. And that's my point, and that's the way it's been for years. I mean, Harold Ballard, if Toronto was not a team or an organization that made so much money, Ballard would not have been in charge with the team, because then there would have been a situation where something had to be done because this team could go down the drain, right? But there was no terrible record that could turn off Maple Leaf fans ever. And so because of that, they are the opposite of the squeaky wheel, is my point. That's all my point is that they're the opposite of the squeaky wheel. But they're starting to get squeaky. We're hearing it. The business of sport in Toronto. The Toronto media has finally decided that there's a team in their town that when that team is being taken advantage of, they have an obligation on behalf of the fans, the readers, the viewers, to stand up for that team. They did it this year with the Raptors, and they did it with the Leafs. It's about time. People outside of Toronto say, "Oh, the media is all on Toronto's side." They are now going to be, and you're going to understand why. the people who are here. It doesn't matter what people outside Toronto, say about the media and how they feel about Toronto, because they're going to hate Toronto. They're the opposition. What's the big surprise? No one should be surprised that Montreal fans are going to say, stupid things about Toronto and, and all the other franchise in the city, in the country. So, yeah. So let's hope that the Leafs don't get taken advantage of in the playoffs, but I'm afraid they're going to have to overcome poor league officiating and league determinations as far as punishment is concerned. But hopefully there's a long enough history for Matthews, Marner, and the Leafs in charge, being Shanahan and Keefe, that they understand that they're playing with one hand tied behind their back. They're going to have to play that much better than the team they're up against. And that's what's going to have to happen. It's just the way it is.
No, and it's honestly, it's been that way for decades. I know everybody likes to say that the league is biased in Toronto's favor, but I think the easiest argument to make against that is 1967.
The easiest argument to make, that is a very easy argument for sure. But there are other things. Putting them in the West when they were a central piece in the National Hockey League, instead of sending Buffalo out west, who are further west than Toronto, by the way, they sent Toronto instead. They always treat Toronto like they're the unwanted adopted child because of their fame and popularity, and because there's nothing bad that's going to happen to them other than not winning a cup, other than not having a good chance, an equal chance to do that. That's small potatoes in the National Hockey League's perspective. It's more important for them to have places like, places in Florida win the cup, places in Carolina, in California. They want hockey to be popular in the places where it isn't normal.
No, this is very true. And the fact of the matter is there's no fan base that travels as well or as far as the Maple Leaf fan base does.
Yeah, there's never a threat of them, no matter how stupid stuff they have to deal with. The fans will always be behind them, and that's almost a curse.
In a fashion, yeah, it is, because it basically means that the league is permitted to run roughshod over the Maple Leafs whenever they want to.
But I'm telling you, there's been a tipping point. This year, it's happened. The media is saying, you know what, enough's enough. And that TSN broadcast where they showed how the Leafs don't get a fair share of penalties called against them, like the other teams that score as much as they do. They clearly are treated differently. And then we see things like what that happened last night. We see the way they're punished by, we saw what happened to Spezza. I'm going to keep repeating it because it bears saying, and it's fact. It is a fact that if you're a Leaf and you do something that can be suspended, be guaranteed you will be, and you're going to set a standard, which Spezza did. He set a standard, one that they had to roll back. And we saw. Go ahead.
I was going to say, at the same time, in the same sense that the league is biased against the Maple Leafs, it's ridiculously slanted in Boston's favor.
Well, when you got referees making passes to players, I think that's a pretty good hint. Montreal's not doing bad. You ignore a hand pass for a goal. I mean, that's the difference between the way teams are treated. It's there. I called it a Freudian slip by the referee when he passed it to the Boston defenseman. He was thinking of helping Boston. He wasn't supposed to help them at that moment. He was supposed to be looking for one. I'm not doing it like that right then.
I chalked that up to a moment of cranial vapor lock, because the puck was coming around the boards and it stopped against my feet, and it should have continued in that direction anyway.
I have two choices.
I'm going to let it. Yeah.
Oh, and I have three choices. I can leave the puck alone, or I can give it to the Carolina player, or I can give it to the Bruin.
Yeah, about that.
All right, let's get on to some other sports, and we'll get to hockey in Canada as well. EPL, Serena Williams and Lewis Hamilton, two black owners of Chelsea.
That's a definite possibility at this point. Both Williams and Hamilton have each pledged just over $13 million to participate in the ownership group under Broughton that's looking to purchase them. Now, the other interesting part of this is that Lewis Hamilton is actually a huge Arsenal fan, and Arsenal just beat Chelsea on Wednesday afternoon, which is part of the table that could be vital for Arsenal in winning the Champions League in 2022-2023. So it's interesting that he would choose to purchase a stake in another team at this point. But, you know, as it is, Williams is already a minority owner in the National Women's Soccer League club, Angel City Football Club. So there's
Absolutely.
that as well.
Toronto FC midfielder Jonathan Rosario on milestone 300th game with TFC. He has played really well this year. He's been one of the real bright lights.
He has been absolutely fantastic for Toronto FC and for Team Canada. So, I mean, 9 years ago when he was 20 and coming into his first training camp with them, he looked at it. He really thought it was going to be his last chance to make a living playing football and doing what he does. 10 seasons later, he's still there. He's still kicking butt, and it's great to have him on side.
For those of you that are planning on going to Touchdown Atlantic, it won't matter so much for those of you that watch on TV. There will be a time change, and it will affect a few other games that day.
Yeah, the good news is it'll now be a matinee, which means that you'll be able to get some drinking in the morning, but even more drinking in afterwards. So that's the most important part.
Remember, we're talking about people going on the road and staying in hotels, folks. That's what we're talking about here. No drinking and driving, please. The Red Blacks.
This is cool. They've actually added an American quarterback to their pool. It's Tyree Adams. Adams is coming off a career at West Carolina where he became the all-time leader in passing yards, passing touchdowns, and total offense. Most recently, he actually suited up for the Indoor Football League Salina Liberty. Now, they've now got 5 quarterbacks. That's Jeremiah Masoli, Taron Christian, Caleb Evans, and Devlin Hodges are the other 4. So there's a bit of a logjam back there, but it gives Ottawa a number of options.
And why not have them? The Lions.
Exactly. Here we go. Defensive lineman Elijah Qualls and running back Taquan Mitchell have both signed with them. Qualls most recently was with the New York Giants in 2021, but the last time he actually had any game action was in the XFL with the DC Defenders back in 2020. So that's interesting to see. Mizell is actually coming to Canada after a 5-year stint in the NFL with Chicago Bears from 2017 into 18. He played 9 games, had 16 yards and a touchdown and 9 carries. So we'll see where he slots in.
The Riders.
Right, the Riders have actually signed Tevin Jones, so this is good. Jones is 6'2", 225. Most recently, spent time with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was originally signed by the Houston Texans in 2016 as an undrafted free agent. So he spent some time with Kansas City and Pittsburgh before landing with the Dallas Cowboys in 2019. So we'll have to see how he fits in there. He brings a pedigree from the University of Memphis, too, so that should be exciting.
Sad moment for me. One of my favorite players in the NFL, quarterback for the Oakland Raiders at the time, legend Darryl LaMonica, nicknamed the Mad Bomber, dies at the age of 80. Aaron, I could tell you stories about this guy. This guy was amazing. He was, I'll say this, he had star quality, and he was a guy that you pulled for. He was a really nice guy on a really, really, the Oakland teams were kind of, how shall I put this bluntly? They were dirty. They were dirty, mean, and they were trouble. And he was a really nice guy who was the quarterback of that team. The contrast was not lost on me, even as a child.
Well, I know that I don't think he was particularly happy of starting behind Kemp when he was originally in Buffalo. So I'm glad to see that he actually did get a chance.
Yeah, he got a great chance. He was a great player. Mind you, it is what it is. 80, he lived a pretty good life, and I got to thank him for the excitement that he gave me. Him and the Kansas City Chiefs back then. Oh, Aaron, It was like the Leafs and Bruins.
Now, he played in that infamous Heidi game, didn't he? Back in '68.
68.
I don't know if you
I don't
remember that.
know. I don't know if well, tell us about it. I don't remember it.
So, um, he was Oakland's quarterback back in '68, and he threw 4 touchdowns in a last-minute comeback over the New York Jets. But millions of people in the Eastern and Central time zones didn't actually get to see it. The game ran long, so the NBC executive made a choice to cut away and show the movie Heidi instead of Oakland completing their Heidi comeback in the final
That
minutes of the
explains
game.
why I saw that movie.
It's the only reason you would have seen that movie, Frank. Come on.
I like Shirley Temple. Major League Baseball. Tiger fans boo Yankees for intentionally walking Miguel Cabrera at 2,999 hits, but they didn't get off lucky.
Though, I don't necessarily blame the Yankees for doing
Not at
this.
all.
I mean, he went 0 for 3 on the day. He was coming up to the
He was
plate for the
due.
4th time. He was definitely due. And at that point in the game, when it was as close as it was, I would have definitely walked him as well. So,
And then, of course, there was a hit and a run and a win.
yeah,
Follow up that.
it is the way it goes. Sometimes, best intentions and all that. He'll have another opportunity to hit his 3,000th hit.
Blue Jays ace Gausman shuts down Red Sox. Boy, he looked good. Man.
He looked really, really good. Lot of smoke thrown in that game.
There were a couple of strikeouts that he had back to back to back. Every strikeout pitch was 85 miles per hour, bottom right-hand corner. An exact same spot. He was amazing. Not quite as biting slider that Dave Stieb had. I don't think anybody will ever have that. That slider was amazing. Telestrators were invented to follow that slider. But Gausman, he's projected to be maybe the best pitcher in the American League this year. With an offense like the Jays.
I mean, after watching him strike out 8 and walk nobody before
absolutely.
a leadoff single to lead off the 9th,
he only pitched, I think they said 60 pitches in 8 innings.
That is accuracy for you. That is efficiency. That's something that you definitely need.
And he showed it. He demonstrated. More bad news in hockey. The Montreal Canadiens, Guy Lafleur, passed away.
Yeah, it's a shame. I know that he had been dealing with lung cancer, a recurrence of it that had cropped up again in late 2020. It's not something that was entirely unexpected.
No.
Coming shortly on the heels of Mike Bossy's passing.
This is a guy who smoked in between periods.
Yeah. Well, it was a different time.
Well, there was nothing wrong with cigarettes.
No, I do actually have. I used to have an old Guy Lafleur poster, signed poster.
In
my
nice.
bedroom as a kid, many moons ago. It's since gone. Unfortunately, I don't know where it went, but it was of him in a plain blue and white uniform.
Wow.
Mainly because the company that he was doing a signing for couldn't afford to buy the likeness rights for the Nordiques, whom he played for at the time, so they couldn't put that on the poster.
Oh my goodness. Van Riemsdyk and the Flyers beat the Canadiens 6-3. Finally, a couple of goals for Price.
Yeah, well, you almost had to wonder if they were ever going to be able to score for him again. I'm glad that they finally did. I'm glad that the Flyers didn't break their slide against the Leafs. So, coming off a 5-2 loss to Toronto a couple nights earlier, walking into Montreal and curb stomping them 6-3 the way that they did was very good.
Absolutely. The Senators, Columbus faces Ottawa, aims to end 3-game skid.
So, Ottawa's had a few issues lately. They've had their shares of ups and downs, obviously, this entire season. But Columbus is coming into this game having lost 3. So we'll have to see where they end up at the end of this. Ottawa's in a bit of trouble, though, because they're averaging almost 10 penalty minutes a game. So
Winnipeg, before the game started against the Hurricanes, knew that they were out of the playoffs. I'm very sad about this. This is a team I was hoping would make the playoffs. I thought high of them. Just this year was not their year. I like the Svechnikovs relationship. Hey, bro. Hey, bro. 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 Turn
I don't
around,
know.
bro.
You stop talking.
I can't. The coach said I can't acknowledge you.
I can't look at you.
Well, here's
Stop
this
it.
puck. Right off the left cheek.
No, but I mean, with the punch that the Jets had up the middle, with some of the centermen that they have, you would have expected a slightly better season out of them. But unfortunately, it didn't quite go their way. Antti Ranta made 20 saves for Carolina. They outshot the Jets 46-22, so that gives you a slight indication of which way the ice was tilted.
Yeah, and let me remind you, folks, it wasn't the proverbial bro; it was the actual brother. That he was, they're actually brothers. That was funny. The way you could see he was intentionally trying not to. No, I'm not looking at you. It was awesome. The Flames.
Right. Yeah. Big night for Matthew Tkachuk. It was kind of cool for them because the Flames have now actually clinched the division. So that's fantastic. Got his 40th goal and recorded his 100th point this season. Chris Tanev got the game winner as they locked up first place in the Pacific. So that was nice to see. Gaudreau, I think, has also reached the century mark. So this is the fourth time in franchise history, I think, now that they've had two 100-point scorers. The other times were Theo Fleury and Al McInnes did it. So
McDavid, 43.
Yeah, he's got a ways to go to catch Austin Matthews. I don't know if he can do it in the games they have left.
Well, Matthews doesn't play.
This is entirely true.
He's got a shot.
His 43rd goal and 2 assists in a 5-2 win over Dallas. So that's, I mean, this team, God, when they want to turn it on, they're absolutely fantastic. When they can't get a decent performance out of their goalies, look out.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think it's not just the goalies because right now their goaltending is really good. Smith is awesome. And they got to keep him fresh for the playoffs. Good news is they're not fighting to make the playoffs, but they are looking to maintain the position they have. So it'll be an interesting finish to the season for them. Love their chances. There's a great chance they're going to run into who, Calgary. But we have the Canucks as well, who, well, they lost this last game, and this could be they're going to have to get the inside straight here to make the playoffs.
Yeah, they're going to have to draw. So they're going to have to draw well. They're going to have to make sure that they get the flop and the river, because at this point here, it really doesn't look like they're going to be able to get there. They need a lot of help from other teams as well in order to make it in.
Yeah.
So,
like I said, an inside straight.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the Maple Leafs, and Stamkos is now the official leader in scoring in Tampa Bay Lightning history. He surpasses the coach of the Montreal Canadiens, who was seen to congratulate him on the Jumbotron.
Yeah, it was a nice feed from Cooch for his record-breaking 954th point. Yeah, that moved him past Martin St. Louis, so that's good. It was on the other side of that was the whole. I called it the show. There's really not much else that can be said about this game, Frank. The Leafs were in tough from the get. They played the first period decently enough, but.
Well, the part that look, I didn't mention this, and this is this. I don't know if I can calm down enough to talk about this subject, and that is goaltending and Shalagrin. He played an outstanding first period that they wasted on the kid. The kid kept him in that game. He kept up with the goalie on the other end, who's had a bad reputation for the past few games, the last 6, in fact. He hasn't won in 6 until this game against the Leafs. And Shalagrin was doing an awesome job of making saves. He looked great. He was compact in his movement. When he did move, he moved with a purpose, and the purpose was proven by a lot of those nice leg kick saves that he was making. He had his angles going really well against a team that was flying pretty well into the Leafs zone. That first period, and as Coach Keith said, it's a shame that kid. That kid played probably the best goaltending we've seen him play in that first period, and then it got to the point where power plays, tip-ins. The kid, I don't think he let in a bad goal, and there were 8 of them.
No, and you know what? A lot of that, it falls back on the Maple Leafs defense, who for some reason just couldn't get it together. And it doesn't get any easier for them either. They've got the
This is what
Florida Panthers.
We tongue in cheek talked about the National Hockey League and how they don't want the Leafs to win. At the end of the day, take that stuff, folks. I'm just having fun with you. Sometimes you say stuff because it sounds like it's true because the evidence is out there. But do I really believe it? I hope not. Because what I do hope is that the Leafs respect the opposition better when they get to the playoffs. Because what we saw last night was a lack of respect for the Tampa Bay Lightning by the Leafs. Not because they're disrespectful, but they didn't play to the level they should play and could play in the second and third period.
It almost seems at this point like the Leafs made it through the first period and said, well, they've seen what we can do. We don't have to keep our foot on the gas. We're pretty much well settled. I don't think anything's going to change in the next few games. We're probably going to end up playing them in the first round, and I think that's pretty much how it looks now. It's one of those. Nothing's going to change. We don't necessarily want to tip our hand. We don't necessarily want to show all of our cards. Why should we try to push it further? It's unlikely that Boston is going to skip over Tampa. Right? I know.
it's going to be a question of who's home, Toronto or Tampa. That's what it looks like. Like that worst case scenario for the Leafs looks like Tampa could pass them if they play like they did last night.
Well, with 4 games left and 6 points on Tampa Bay, there is a very small chance that it could happen if the Leafs fail to win another game this season.
And that's the other issue why they didn't win. There was no desperation in their game, Aaron. And the other reason is that they had their blender out there. They didn't have their starting units. It's like putting their training camp team against the team that's already played this long. They're experimenting, and a team that was as desperate as Tampa is, they have not been playing well. And this is a Stanley Cup contender that can look in the mirror and see what's going on. They know the way they're supposed to play. They know what winning looks like. They know the kind of effort they need to put in, and they're just gearing up for the playoffs. And I think this was a good lesson for the Leafs, that they need to pay attention to the simple fact that they have to rise, not to a level they feel they need to play, but to the highest level they can play. And that's the lesson I think they walk away from. If they don't, then they won't make it past the first round, because that's essentially, they're going to have to go toe to toe. They've got the guys now. They've got Simmons. They've got guys on their team that can, say, excuse me, we won't be putting up with any of that. So, that excuse is gone. They can all play a little taller, and they're going to have to when the playoffs roll around.
Just looking at the lines from yesterday, you had Bunting, Tavares, and Marner as your first.
Say what
line.
now? Well, that
Bunting,
wasn't a bad
Tavares, and
line.
Marner.
That
No,
wasn't
it wasn't
a bad line. That was, but still, Bunting on that line.
And then you follow that up with Nylander, Kerfoot, Engvall, Mikheyev, Kampf, and Blackwell, and finally Clifford, Spezza, and Simmons. That's definitely blenderized right there.
And you know what? This team, we can joke as much as we like that without Matthews, they play well. When it really matters, when the pressure's on, when the game truly, truly matters, do you really want to play without Matthews?
Realistically speaking, I would rather have him.
I don't think so.
But at this point, if the Leafs can save him for the playoffs, because it's not
whatever's
bothering
them, they don't want it to be worse, Aaron, and that's the smart thing to do. This is the whole point of not, we've talked about this before, and I've said it before, and I mean this wholeheartedly. It is so much better to be in the playoffs late in the season than at the end of the season. You know, when a lot of teams expend a lot of energy and emotional assets to get there. And unfortunately, that becomes their Stanley Cup, right? Making it to the playoffs. Whereas you have other teams that have, if they're smart, they rest their goaltenders, they rest their stars. They go in with the process, working on the process, not leaving the process of how you play behind, but allowing other players to step in to get the team, to keep it going, get them to that level, but allow the players that are going to be playing a lot of games because, it's every other night. You end up in a 7-game series. Holy moly. That's a schedule that's going to, many have called the playoffs not a championship, but an attrition, because that's what it is. It's a series of survivals.
It most assuredly is. It is, however, not nearly as much of a grind as the lacrosse one is.
Oh, stop. The
Because
lacrosse one sucks because if you lose, you're out. That was the way it used to be.
if you look at Major Series lacrosse and you look at the Mann Cup, it's a 16-game season, and then it's potentially 28 playoff games. So you could technically play more playoffs than you could regular season games.
No, absolutely, because who's going to be there anyway. We talked about it on the show yesterday. You have franchise that basically are perennial. You have a half dozen teams in Canada that's good. 2 of them are going to be the ones that are up against each other every year. 2 of them.
Now, I know that you and Gary probably discussed this to death already, but what was the word out of the OLA with Owen Sound and Brampton? They're moving back, correct?
No, I know nothing about that. Gary didn't bring that up.
Interesting. Maybe something worth discussing with him, as the OLA came down and said Owen Sound wasn't actually permitted to move. So they had about a month to get their house in order and get everything shifted back to Brampton.
So all those old Brampton Excelsior folks got their way.
It does appear that way, yes. I'm still digging around for more information, but it might be good to have Gary.
Let's talk about that Monday.
Yeah,
let's talk about that Monday. And I'll have a call with Gary and we'll talk about that. Instead, we had the defensive coordinator of the Toronto Rock yesterday, so we weren't really talking about that kind of stuff.
That's fair.
Yeah, so it is what it is. Okay, so the Leafs, we're a week away from the playoffs, just over a week, and it's going to be interesting and looking forward to the playoffs, and we know everybody out there is too. Charles Barkley guarantees the Leafs will win the first round.
This is interesting. I mean, Sir Charles has talked about these sorts of things before.
He likes Toronto.
He loves Toronto. Let's be honest. I kind of wished he could have ended his career here, but it is what it is. But yeah, they were talking about the Raptors being down 3-0 to the Philadelphia 76ers. He actually came out on air and guaranteed that the Leafs are going to win a series this year. So, not necessarily the boldest of predictions, but hey, at least one is not as bad as not getting any. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is. Speaking of winning a series, doesn't look like the Raptors will.
They are definitely in tough. As the old saying goes, you aren't in a series until you've lost a home game. And,
check.
Yeah, there you go. And
Check.
I don't think there's been any NBA team that's ever come back from a 3-0 deficit. Not in recent memory.
You might be right.
It's a tough hole to climb out of. It definitely is. I mean, Jurassic Park certainly helped. The crowd at the the Scotiabank Arena definitely helped. But in the end, it just wasn't enough. And Embiid is just too big.
Yeah, the problem with the Raptors is they lack a big star. Now they have a big man, but he's not a star. They have some stars on their team, but they're not. That's what it looks like right now. And they were that game where they had opportunities in the last couple of minutes to win the game twice, and they the way they lost from the foul line, that's
tough.
That's
It really
totally
is tough.
anti-Raptor. I
Yeah.
mean, that is not like the Raptors. The foul line is one of their best friends, and it was not in Game 3 of this NBA series at
You had
all.
to wonder. I wondered what happened to Siakam at halftime because he just seemed to disappear. I'm not sure what it was, but it almost was like he didn't want the ball in his hands during the late third quarter, fourth quarter at all. He was pushing it off an awful lot. I'm not sure if that indicates any sort of confidence issues or if he might have had an issue
Well, the
shooting.
same
But
could be said of Harden as well, right? He didn't
yeah,
play as well in the second half as he did in the first. So, that kind of stuff happens. You get your defenses set up. That's the coach's job. But Nick Nurse hasn't looked like a genius like he has been well thought of, and I think of him as a genius. His genius didn't affect this series, and it's as good as Tiger Williams said, they're done like a dinner.
let's see what sort of a performance they put in on their next home game because I don't want to see them swept.
Now it's about pride.
Yeah,
Not being swept. PCs extend Manitoba government.
right. If we're talking about the house extensions that we're talking about the
government hasn't fulfilled reconciliation commitments.
Okay, different story, right? Sorry about that. Yeah, no. Auditors General, the Manitoba's Auditor General, sorry, can't speak now. I said that the province has failed to develop a plan to advance reconciliation efforts, despite committing to do so in legislation passed over half a decade ago.
Muslim groups are concerned after Edmonton mosques receive packages with powdery substance. Aaron.
Now, this has turned out to be nothing, thankfully.
Just causing fear, that's all.
No, this is essentially at its root domestic terrorism. When you mail packages filled with a powdery substance to religious organizations.
I think if you terrorize people, it's terrorism. And that's a definition of terrorizing somebody, telling them you're going to poison them.
Yeah, and it was two different places. It wasn't just one localized place. It was two. Can you imagine if a Catholic church got a package like that?
Find them. Oh, it's happened. Find them. Put them in jail. Can't have that kind of stuff in this great country. Ontario announces $500 million for school child care projects. Affordable child care is something that's on the front burner federally and provincially, and they're holding hands and making it happen. And this is just something else.
Well, it's currently they're looking at the funding to build and improve schools, create new licensed childcare spaces. Talking about 15,700 new student spaces and just over 1,500 new licensed childcare spaces in schools. Now, it's no surprise that you're getting a $500 million commitment as we're leading up to an election. So we'll have to see if this actually holds true afterwards.
Winnipeg Bay Stores downtown is being given to an Indigenous group. Tell us about it, Aaron.
There we go. Sorry about that. So this is the company's 655,000 square foot building in downtown Winnipeg will be transformed to include 300 affordable housing units, a museum, an art gallery, and a couple different restaurants. There's also a plan in there for a health center that will embrace both Western and traditional medical practices. The official announcement is expected, it was supposed to have been today with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on hand. I'm going to go back into the archives and check everything, but that particular location was closed in November 2020. So the governments, both municipal and provincial, have been working to try to find a new use for the site since then.
Good use?
Yes, definitely.
House Hours using a tactic they criticized the previous government for.
Apologies. This is the story I thought you were referring to earlier, as opposed to Manitoba not doing enough. Nova Scotia's progressive conservatives used their majority on Thursday night to extend the legislative workday by 6 hours in an attempt to speed up the passage of bills through the provincial legislature. This is the same kind of procedural tactic Jim Houston was harshly critical of former Liberal governments for. So, it's one of those, it's okay when we do it, but it's not okay when you do it.
Oh, boy. Let's take a look at some COVID issues. The Toronto Zoo animals get their vaccine. Were they holding out? They didn't want it? What's the story?
Well, actually, the job was actually made easier due to voluntary positive reinforcement trainings. So they actually received 320 vaccine doses for 120 animals, with 2 doses per animal given about 2 or 3 weeks apart. So many of the animals would willingly present an area of the body, such as an arm or a tail, as part of the regular training exercises with their trusted keepers, so that they were used to the idea of getting a needle. Most animals in zoos are vaccinated anyways, again, because they're being held in a different environment to what they would normally be in. This is to help protect them more than anything else. Yeah, it's good to see that they're willing to go along with it for treats.
Well, except for the monkeys that were in a bunch of trucks.
Wow.
Damn monkeys.
Mm.
Boston urges masks as battle brews over transit rule. The CDC got told by a federal judge in Florida, no, you can't mandate masks.
See, and this has wider implications now. Not only have they overturned that, Boston Public Health has noted a rise in hospitalizations, as well as a 65% increase in cases and an even larger spike in COVID-19 levels in local wastewater samples. But because this ruling has come down from a federal judge in Florida, people are saying, well, how will this affect the CDC's ability to try to put in mask mandates in the future? Because we are going to have another illness. It's a matter of time until it gets here. But now that the government agency, the CDC, has been officially hamstrung by this judge in Florida, how will they be able to effectively control pandemics and illness outbreaks in the future?
Don't forget, the mask mandate was ending in 2 weeks.
Supposed to, yeah.
Right? It was going to end anyway. But what this is about now, the federal government needs to defend the ability of the CDC to make decisions like that. I don't know if science, the CDC, will ever recover from how this pandemic went and how it was politicized. Aaron, it's been, it's like Pandora's box has been opened, and everyone's going to suffer. And what's going to happen is the people responsible, the part that is most irritating, the part that bothers me more than anything, the people who caused the problem are going to be the ones who blame everybody else. That's the part that really ticks me off. I understand that science isn't perfect. It's constant. It's a fluid thing. We learn things every day. But I hope that science has learned some lessons. Some scientists have learned some lessons, primarily on their side, that they've learned that they're not as smart as they think they are. And they need to be a little less, how can I put this? Front heavy, like be very heavy when you arrive at a conclusion and not leave anything to chance, right?
Yeah.
And people need to understand better that scientists are about science and science changes. And if it isn't for science, we wouldn't be in a good place as a human race. I'm a proud Canadian, proud of a doctor. I'm a diabetic. Dr. Banting, not the one that plays the Hulk. The other Banting, the real one, the one that invented my cure. Without that cure, a lot of people would die. So, there's a lot of good that science does. And I think it's been given a really heavy dose of humility. And not that they didn't need it, not that they did need it. They just got a dose of humility through this experience.
No, they genuinely did. And I know that while the judge has basically thrown out the mask mandate, Philadelphia has actually reimposed one.
Yeah.
So
well,
there's that to take.
There's
into
communities
as well.
that doesn't mean that the transit system can't say you have to wear a mask.
No, exactly.
Now, enforcement might be a little difficult, but it doesn't matter who says you have to wear a mask. Enforcement's a little difficult. I mean, nothing speaks to the insanity of the people's reaction to masks more than in-flight brouhahas.
This is very true.
That we witnessed over the past 2 years. I mean,
And
people taped to chairs with duct tape.
now that was actually very amusing. I'm
I
not
don't know.
gonna
That
lie.
looked, when I see the video of that, it looks kind of set up when the guy's going, "Help me." I don't
Well,
know.
I'm certain he was trying to appeal to people's better nature and be pathetic, but
Okay, I'll wear a mask. Too late. Shut up. I shouldn't laugh because that stuff's it's insane. But it's typical of us human beings. We sometimes, the level of reaction too many times is not appropriate.
no, sometimes the reaction goes absolutely over the top, and it's entirely not necessary or required. I
Or
will
under
agree
the
on that.
bottom.
Hmm.
Finding that happy medium is such a challenge for the human race. And when you add add politics into it, where basically you're saying, if you do that, you're not one of us. It is so horrible because when it comes to vaccines and masks updates, mandates and updates for that matter, um, when it comes to that stuff, it is not political. You can have a family member, regardless of their political standing. You could have two people in the same, different political stripes, both have grandparents who are in trouble if they get any kind of, virus. It's not political, and it just, each individual person. If Aaron wants to wear a mask, I don't want to hear that people give him a hard time. If I want to wear a mask, I don't want anybody giving me a hard time. If someone doesn't want to wear a mask, I heard this. I don't know how this is going to go over. One doctor said, I have a suggestion. If you go on an airplane, because now you're not going to wear it anymore, she said, carry a couple extra masks. Can you imagine being the person to say to the one in the middle seat, would you mind putting on a mask?
Honestly, at
You
this
know what I
point,
mean? And
though,
that's a doctor suggesting that. Has she not been watching the news?
no, obviously not.
Can you imagine, Eric? Because that could go a lot of different ways, right? Would you
It
mind
most
wearing
certainly
this
could.
mask for me? I have an invalid mother at home, grandmother at home, and it would really be nice if I don't bring COVID to her. The person in the middle seat doesn't,
No,
if they're sensitive to that situation, you'll know right away, Aaron. That's my suggestion, is that if you ask and they go, shut the what up, you go, okay. Because that's where it's at today. I mean, people are going to tell you, they don't care. This is what we've become. This is what society and the world has become.
I just think it's sad that a lot of people have been reduced to 3-year-olds in a situation like this, stomping their feet because I don't want to
I,
wear a
I'm
mask
I'm
anymore
saying
because I'm tired of it.
I'm
You know?
saying 14-year-olds, where they think they have all the answers,
Mm,
where they have the ability to think they can have a conversation with you, and gall darn it, sometimes they make sense, and it's crazy because if they thought about it, they know they weren't making sense, but a little bit of doubt, right? Just enough brain power that puts you on your heels a little bit, and that's the problem. Is that how are you to be 100% right? How can you be 100% right in anything, Aaron? When it comes to, again, we talk about science. Science is a fluid thing. Oh, well, you said if we had the vaccine, we wouldn't have to worry anymore. Yeah, but that was before the other variants came that said, hey, vaccine, here's my middle finger.
and here's the thing: most people don't seem to understand that things can evolve. That's how we got here. That's how the virus got here.
Yeah.
It evolves, right? And the fact that people are not willing to take that into consideration is another issue. And like I was mentioning earlier, Frank, everybody's behaving like 3-year-olds because they think they deserve a reward because they're tired of wearing masks. And
Yeah.
that's not how it works. The virus doesn't care if you're a conservative or a liberal, if you're wearing a mask or not, if you're vaccinated or not. It doesn't care. If it can find a way to get in, it will get in.
But it will be
It is what it is.
disappointed if you're vaccinated.
Yeah,
And you
because
know
it
what?
won't be able to kill you.
And you know what? Don't the dinosaurs wish they had a little science or a little technology? I mean, it would have helped if they would have had some fire extinguishers.
possibly.
On that note, so technology's not all bad. They could have used some fire extinguishers, I'll tell you that. All right. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Frank.
He's Aaron William Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching Candid Frank Live, Aaron, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For Candid Frank Live, other news, entertainment, and sports programming we offer, please check out spanglishworld.ca. Read it, download it, hear it, live it, run by it. Thanks for watching. Ciao for now.